Human diplomatic guards arrived unarmed? The council found out too late. If you are not a heretic, then declare your city of origin. Leave a comment, a like, and subscribe to the Emperor's Glory. At the conclusion, rate this tale from 0 to 10. The Emperor protects. The Galactic Council's emergency session fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life, showing 3 massive vessels dropping out of warp space near the Kepler station. The ships were crude, industrial, covered in Gothic architecture that made no tactical sense. Most disturbing of all, they bore the twin-headed eagle of the Terran Imperium. "By the 7 moons," whispered Ambassador Zethkri, her feline ears flattening against her skull. "Humans." The bovine representative, Ambassador Torgan, shifted his massive frame uneasily. The distress signal mentioned diplomatic protection. Surely they wouldn't send those things for diplomacy. On the display, smaller craft detached from the human vessels. Drop pods. Not shuttles, not transports. Drop pods designed for orbital assault. The assembled aliens watched in fearful, growing horror as dozens of these metal coffins streaked toward the station. "This is Kepler Control to approaching human vessels," the station's AI announced with barely controlled panic. "Please identify your diplomatic credentials and intention." The response came through in Gothic low, the humans' ritual language, before translating. "This is Battle Brother Sergeant Maximus of the Crimson Fist's 3rd Company. We bring the Emperor's protection to his faithful servants. Prepare for boarding." Boarding? The avian ambassador Kretok's feathers ruffled in fearful alarm. That's a military term. The first drop pod punched through Kepler Station's thunderous clang that shook the entire diplomatic wing. Emergency klaxons wailed as atmosphere rushed out before emergency shields activated. Through the smoke and sparks stepped something that made every alien present question their understanding of diplomacy. The creature was 8 feet tall, encased in power armor that hummed with barely contained energy. Its helmet bore a skull motif, and purity seals fluttered from various attachment points. In its hands, which the human had described as unarmed in their transmission, it carried a weapon that looked like it could level city blocks. "Greetings, honored Xenos," the giant spoke, its voice amplified by external speakers. "I am Sergeant Maximus. The Emperor protects." Ambassador Zethkri's diplomatic training kicked in despite her fearful terror. "Welcome, honored human. We were expecting diplomatic envoys?" "We are the diplomatic envoys," Maximus replied matter-of-factly. "The Crimson Fists have served the Emperor's diplomatic corps for over 4 millennia. More aggressive, thunderous impacts echoed through the station as additional drop pods arrived. Each disgorged another armored giant, until 12 of them stood in the council chamber, their weapons, apparently standard diplomatic equipment, trained in different directions with practiced efficiency. "You said you were unarmed," squeaked the rodent-like representative from Scar 7. "We carry only ceremonial weapons," Brother Thaddeus explained, checking the power cell on his bolt rifle. "This is a standard diplomatic bolter." "Very ceremonial." The Tau representative, Por Elmien, activated his translation matrix multiple times. Surprised, it was malfunctioning. "Your diplomatic weapons appear to be military grade." "All human weapons are diplomatic," Sergeant Maximus stated with absolute conviction. Peace through superior firepower is the Emperor's will. Ambassador Torgan's massive bovine head swayed nervously. Perhaps we should focus on the threat assessment. The reptilian hegemony has demanded immediate surrender of this sector. Their fleet will arrive within 6 hours. Reptilians. The word carried such anger in Maximus's voice that several aliens involuntarily stepped back. Cold-blooded Xenos who enslave the innocent. The Emperor despises such creatures. They have 300 ships.
Ambassador, Zethkri explained desperately. Advanced technology, superior numbers. The mathematics are clear. Resistance is impossible. The Space Marines exchanged glances, and several made a gesture the aliens couldn't interpret, touching their right fist to their left shoulder. It looked mysterious, almost religious. Mathematics, Brother Castor repeated slowly, as if the word tasted strange. Sister, you misunderstand warfare. Mathematics matter little when the Emperor's will is involved. The Emperor wills our victory, Brother Thaddeus added. Therefore, we cannot lose. The avian diplomat Kreetak's electronic translator sparked as it tried to process this logic. That's not how military strategy works. Faith doesn't stop plasma cannons. Clearly, you have never fought alongside humans.
Sergeant Maximus said with something that might have been pity. Faith stops everything, Xenos. Faith in the Emperor conquers all. A new alarm sounded. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching reptilian fleet. 300 vessels, just as reported, their sensor signatures blazing across every screen in the station. Emperor's blood, Brother Severus breathed, studying the tactical display. Only 300. The reptilians insult us with such small numbers. Small? Ambassador Zethkri's feline composure cracked entirely. That's an extinction-level force. We have 12 stations, 37 ships, and minimal defensive capabilities. You also have us, Maximus reminded her. 12 battle brothers of the Adeptus Astartes. In the Emperor's name, we have fought greater odds.
12 against 300,000, poor Elmian calculated aloud. The statistical probability of success is 0.00. Brother Thaddeus, Maximus interrupted, what does the Codex Astartes say about impossible odds? Chapter 7, verse 15, Thaddeus quoted from memory. And lo, did the Emperor's chosen stand upon the field of battle, outnumbered beyond counting. Yet they knew neither fear nor retreat, for the Emperor's will burned in their hearts like stars. What are numbers to faith? What are weapons to righteousness? The enemy counted their ships and found them many. The Astartes counted their faith and found it infinite. The assembled aliens stared in surprised, stunned silence. That's not a tactical manual, Ambassador Torgan said weakly. That's poetry. It's scripture, Brother Castor corrected, and tactical doctrine.
They're the same thing. Listen carefully, honored Xenos, Sergeant Maximus said, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining simple facts to children. The reptilians believe they come to conquer. They calculate odds, assess firepower, plan invasion. They are creatures of cold logic and mathematical certainty. He paused, weapon held casually in hands that could crush steel. Menacing. They have never fought humans. The first reptilian transmission arrived exactly on schedule, broadcast on all frequencies with typical arrogance.
inferior warm-blooded species, your system belongs to the hegemony now. Surrender unconditionally, and your deaths will be quick." The response came from Sergeant Maximus, broadcast back on the same frequency. "Heretical Xenos, you have chosen to stand against the Emperor's faithful. Your deaths will be thorough."
In the shocked silence that followed, Brother Thaddeus began to chant in Gothic low, soon joined by his battle brothers. The words were ancient, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. "What are they doing?" whispered Ambassador Kretak. "Pre-battle prayers," Por Elmyen translated, his voice desperate, hollow with disbelief. They're actually going to fight!" Through the viewports, the first reptilian ships came into visual range. Sleek, efficient killing machines that bristled with weapon arrays. Behind them, more ships emerged from warp space in perfectly organized formations. The Space Marines finished their prayers and began checking their equipment with methodical precision. Each movement was ritual, each action accompanied by whispered benedictions. They weren't preparing for battle. They were preparing for worship. "The Emperor protects," they said in unison. And deep in the back of every alien mind, a small, terrifying thought began to form. What if they're right? The Vorthon council chamber fell into stunned silence as Ambassador Thekvar processed what he had just witnessed. The human diplomatic guards had arrived unarmed, as promised. What they hadn't mentioned was that they themselves were the weapons. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Zephyra, her crystalline wings trembling. "Those were Karvak destroyers. Their exoskeletons can withstand plasma cannon fire." Brother Captain Marcus stepped forward, casually brushing Chitten's fragments from his power armor's shoulder pad. "The Emperor protects, Xenos friends. Your enemies chose poorly when they threatened innocence in his sight." The massive Ursine delegate, Gromar Ironpaw, leaned forward in his reinforced chair. You tore through their battle line with your bare hands? How is this possible?" "Confident ceramite-enhanced fists," replied Sergeant Torres matter-of-factly, flexing his gauntleted fingers. "And righteous fury. The Emperor's enemies know no mercy." Ambassador Thekvar's tail twitched nervously. 3 days ago, when the Galactic Peace Council had received humanity's offer of peaceful mediation in the Karvak crisis, he had expected diplomats, soft-spoken negotiators with briefcases and compromise proposals. Instead, the Imperium of Man had sent 5 2-meter-tall post-human super soldiers who spoke of their God Emperor with fanatic devotion. "The Karvak hive mind has been expanding for 3 cycles," explained Counselor Veltar, her aquatic breathing apparatus bubbling anxiously. "They've consumed 17 worlds. Their bioships number in the thousands. You 5, desperate, think you can stop them?" Brother Captain Marcus exchanged a look with his battle brothers. 5? Honored Xenos, you misunderstand. We are merely the advanced diplomatic team. The real force hasn't arrived yet. "Real force!" Thekvar's voice cracked. Chapter Master Corvanus deemed 5 companies sufficient for initial negotiations, Marcus replied calmly. Should diplomacy fail, he's prepared to commit the entire chapter. That's 1,000 battle brothers. The Felinian delegate, prowess leader Shayara, bared her fangs in what other species might mistake for aggression, but Thekvar recognized as deep unease. "Your diplomacy
involved charging directly into Harvok bioconstructs while screaming war hymns. Effective diplomacy, corrected Sergeant Voss, the squad's heavy weapons specialist. The Karvok understand only strength. We demonstrated imperial resolve. By punching through living tanks? Added the avian counselor Skyweaver Kess, ruffling his iridescent feathers. With your fists? The Emperor guides our hands to righteousness, Torres replied solemnly. Their heretical flesh could not withstand his blessing. Thekvar found himself studying these humans more carefully. When they had first arrived, he had been struck by their size and the obvious modifications to their physiology. Now he realized those modifications were far more extensive than he had imagined. These weren't enhanced humans. These were barely human at all. Forgive my curiosity, Gromar rumbled, but your species confuses us. Your diplomatic credentials describe you as modified human soldiers, yet you display capabilities that rival our most advanced battle constructs. Brother Captain Marcus nodded approvingly. An astute observation, honored Bearkin. We are Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Angels of Death. Our flesh has been reforged in his image, our bones replaced with ceramite, our blood enhanced with sacred catalepsian nodes and sucin membranes. Translation? Asked Zephyra dryly. We don't sleep. We don't tire. We heal rapidly, and we can survive in hard vacuum, supplied Apothecary Sergeant Cassius, who had been quietly cataloging alien physiological markers. Among other modifications. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages as the delegates processed this information. Thkvar raised his hand for silence. You're saying your entire species has undergone such modifications? Oh no, Marcus chuckled, a sound like grinding ceramite. We are the elite. Perhaps 1 in 10 million humans possesses the genetic markers necessary for Astartes enhancement. The vast majority of humanity serves the Emperor in other ways. Other ways? Veltar's tentacles writhed anxiously. The Astra Militarum fields trillions of baseline human soldiers across 1 million worlds, explained Sergeant Khan, the squad's tactical specialist. The Imperial Navy maintains tens of thousands of warships. The Adeptus Mechanics tends to our technology. The Adeptus Sororitas serves as the Ecclesiarchy's military arm. The Inquisition roots out heresy and corruption. Shiara's ears flattened against her skull. Trillions? How many humans are there? Conservative estimates suggest somewhere between 1 and 10 quadrillion imperial citizens, Marcus replied casually. The administratum hasn't completed a full census in several millennia. Silence fell like a physical weight. Thekvar felt his gill slits flutter with involuntary panic breathing. A quadrillion? The entire Galactic Peace Council represented maybe 1 trillion sentient beings across all member species combined. That's impossible, Kess chirped weakly. No species could support such numbers. The resource requirements alone. Humanity spreads across 1 million worlds, noble Sky Brother, Torres explained patiently. Hive cities house billions per planet. Agri-worlds feed trillions. Forge worlds produce the material of war, all in service to the Emperor's grand vision. Gromar leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his bulk. And yet you claim to be a peaceful diplomatic mission. The Imperium seeks peace through strength, Marcus replied. The Emperor's peace, When all his enemies are dead, when all heresy is purged, when all Xenos threats are neutralized, then there shall be peace. You want to kill every non-human in the galaxy? Veltar's voice rose to a fearful, panicked whistle. Not at all, Apothecary Cassius interjected smoothly. Sirius, the Emperor teaches that some Xeno species possess value. Those who prove themselves loyal allies of humanity, who accept imperial protection and guidance, may earn the right to exist under his benevolent rule. Thekvar felt his world tilting. Accept imperial rule? We're offering you membership in our peaceful alliance. A generous offer, Marcus acknowledged. However, the Imperium already possesses all the alliance it requires. Humanity stands eternal, united under the Emperor's will. What we offer you is the chance to join that unity. And if we refuse? Shiara's claws extended reflexively. The 5 Space Marines exchanged glances. Then you remain free to govern your own territories, Marcus said carefully. So long as you pose no threat to imperial interests. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the recycled air. Gromar was the first to voice it. And who determines what constitutes a threat to imperial interests? The Emperor protects his children, Torres replied with absolute certainty. His will is made manifest through his servants. The Imperium has endured for 10,000 years because we recognize threats before they mature. 10,000 years? Kess's voice cracked. Your civilization is 10,000 years old? The Great Crusade began in the 30th millennium, Khan confirmed. Though humanity's dominion of Terra stretches back to the Dark Age of technology, some 25,000 years past. Thekvar's mind, surprised, reeled. The oldest species in the Council, the Eldari refugees, claimed a history of perhaps 8,000 years. These humans spoke casually of surprised 25 millennia of continuous civilization. Impossible, Zephyra whispered. No species survives that long. Entropy, evolution, social collapse, something always intervenes. Heresy! Cassius stated flatly. The Emperor is immortal. His will transcends the limits of mortal flesh. So long as he endures, so too shall humanity. You worship your leader as a god? Veltar asked incredulously. The Emperor is a god, Marcus corrected gently. The God-Emperor of mankind, Master of the Imperium, Lord of Terra, Father of the Primarchs. His psychic might sustains the Astronomicon that guides our ships through the warp. His divine will protects humanity from the predations of chaos. Without him, our species would have perished millennia ago. The delegates sat in stunned silence, processing the implications. Finally, Gromar spoke. The Karvak hive mind has demanded our unconditional surrender. Their bioships are massing at the system's edge. Even if everything you claim is true, can 5 of you truly stand against such numbers? Brother Captain Marcus smiled, and there was something genuinely warm in the expression despite his post-human features. Honored, bear friend, you still misunderstand. We didn't come here to fight the Karvak. Then why are you here? Thekvar demanded. We came to offer them the same choice we offer you, Torres explained. Submit to imperial will or face the consequences of defiance. They're a hive mind, Shiara protested. They don't negotiate, they consume. Then they have chosen, Khan said simply. The Emperor's justice will follow.
As if summoned by his words, the chamber's proximity alarms began wailing. Emergency lighting bathed the assembly in crimson as Thekvar's aide, a nervous Rodenton functionary, scurried in with a data slate. "Ambassador," he squeaked, "long-range sensors are detecting massive warp disturbances at the system's edge. Something enormous is translating into real space." Marcus checked a device on his wrist, nodding with confidence. Right on schedule, Chapter Master Corvanus rarely keeps appointments waiting. Through the chamber's transparent aluminum viewport, new stars began appearing in the void. Dozens, then hundreds of brilliant points of light. As Thekvar watched in growing horror, the lights resolved into the angular forms of colossal warships, their hulls adorned with cathedral spires and weapon batteries the size of city blocks. "By the ancestors," Gromar breathed, "how many ships?" "A modest fleet," Marcus replied conversationally. "Perhaps 300 vessels. The chapter operates 12 battle barges, each capable of cracking continents. The escort squadrons provide tactical support and orbital bombardment capabilities." The largest vessel dominated the view screen, a cathedral fortress kilometers long, bristling with macro cannons and lance batteries. Gothic architecture melded seamlessly with brutal functionality, creating something that was, surprised, beautiful and terrifying. "That," Marcus said with unmistakable pride, "is the Eternal Crusader, flagship of the Imperial Fists chapter. Chapter Master Corvinus commands from her bridge." Zephyra's crystalline form was literally vibrating with fear harmonics. "Those ships, they're larger than our space stations." "Imperial shipyards have had 25 millennia to perfect their craft," Cassius observed. "The Eternal Crusader is merely 9,000 years old. Some vessels in the fleet date back to the Great Crusade itself." Another alarm joined the first, this one indicating massive energy buildups across the human fleet. Weapon systems that could sterilize worlds were powering up with casual precision. "They're targeting the Karvak bioships," Thekvar's aide reported, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "Standard Imperial doctrine," Khan confirmed. "Overwhelming firepower applied with surgical precision. The Karvak will be offered one final opportunity to withdraw. Should they refuse, he didn't need to finish. The implications were written in fearful letters of fire across the void as the human fleet assumed battle formation with the smooth precision of a machine that had performed this dance countless times before. Marcus activated his Vox communicator. "Chapter Master, this is Diplomatic Team Alpha. The Xenos Council has been enlightened regarding Imperial capabilities." A voice like grinding adamantium responded, audible throughout the chamber. "Acknowledged, Marcus. Status of Karvak response. No communication from the hive mind, my lord. They appear to be massing for assault." "Predictable. The alien knows only consumption. Very well. Prepare for exterminatus protocols." The word sent ice through every alien heart in the chamber. Even those unfamiliar with Imperial Gothic understood the finality in that ancient term. "Chapter Master," Marcus said carefully, "recommend restraint. These council species show potential value as future Imperial allies." A pause. "Acceptable. Conventional bombardment authorized. Make it thorough." The Vox clicked off. Marcus turned back to the terrified delegates. "You have perhaps 30 minutes before the engagement begins.
I suggest you order your civilian populations to sealed shelters and pray to whatever gods you acknowledge." "Pray?" Shayara's voice was barely a whisper. "That the Emperor's mercy proves greater than his wrath," Torres replied solemnly. "What you witness today will determine the future of this entire sector." As if to punctuate his words, the void erupted in silent fire as the Karvak biofleet responded to the Imperial challenge, launching swarms of living missiles and closing for predatory hunger. The real war was about to begin. The Zephyrian council chambers erupted into chaos as the first explosion shook the orbital station. Ambassador Kethvar's feathers bristled with panic as emergency lights bathed the diplomatic complex in crimson. Through the viewport, burning debris from the outer defensive platforms painted deadly streaks across the void. "Impossible!" whispered Commodore Thane of the Felinian Defense Fleet, his spotted coat rippling with tension. "Our long-range sensors detected nothing. How did they get so close?" Captain Marcus Aurelius stood motionless, his massive power armor somehow seeming even larger in the confined space. The other two Space Marines flanked him, their helms tracking the explosions with mechanical precision. To the assembled alien delegates, they appeared disturbingly calm. "Captain," Kethvar's voice cracked with barely contained fear, "your diplomatic mission appears poorly timed. We are under attack by—" "Hrud Migration Fleet," Marcus interrupted, his vox grill giving his words an ominous, mechanical undertone. 17 vessels. Entropy fields already destabilizing your outer defenses." The Tau Watercast diplomat, Sha Sui Mien, stepped forward. "Impossible! Our sensors show nothing. How could you know this?" Brother Sergeant Cassius turned his death's head helmet toward the Tau. "We have fought these Xenos before. Their temporal distortions mask approach vectors. Your technology cannot detect what exists partially outside linear time." Another explosion, closer this time. The station shuddered, and several smaller alien delegates scattered in fearful panic. Captain Marcus remained perfectly still, but his battle brothers began making subtle adjustments to their gear, motions that looked casual but carried ominous purpose. "You speak as if familiar with these creatures," Thane observed, his feline eyes narrowing. "The Hrud are legendary, myths, stories to frighten younglings." "Tell that to High Fleet Kraken," Cassius replied grimly, "or the tomb worlds of Solemnus. The Hrud devour time itself, Commodore. Your peoples have been fortunate to avoid them." The Eldar Farseer, a Lythirial of Ulthwé, had remained silent throughout the diplomatic proceedings. Now she stepped forward, her ancient features taut with recognition. "Mankeh, speak truth. I sense them now, shadows that eat tomorrow, creatures that age metal to dust with their presence." "What do they want?" Kethvar demanded. "Calm," Marcus answered. "Migration route," Marcus answered. "Your system lies in their path. They will strip mine your worlds of temporal energy, aging them to barren husks in moments. Your people will crumble to dust in seconds." The diplomatic chamber fell fearful, silent, except for the distant rumble of failing defenses. Through the viewport, they could see Zephyrian fighters engaging something that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, serpentine shapes that moved wrong, leaving trails of decay in space itself. "Surely our combined fleets can—" Thane began.
Your fleets are dying, Brother Apothecary Matthias spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the clinical certainty of one who had seen countless battlefields. Entropy fields are aging your hull plating, weapon systems failing as components rust in real time. Your pilots will die of old age in minutes. As if summoned by his words, a Felinian cruiser passed by the viewport, its pristine hull rapidly developing corrosion blooms that spread like cancer across its surface. The warship broke apart not from weapon damage, but from simple structural failure as millennia of entropy caught up with it in seconds. "Emperor's mercy," whispered Marcus, the first hint of emotion entering his voice. "Your god cannot help here," a Lethariel said bitterly. "The Hrud are older than your Imperium, older than my people's fall. They are refugees from a war that ended before your species drew breath." Sha Swim Yen's blue skin had paled to almost white. "The greater good demands we evacuate immediately. There must be escape routes." "None that will work," Marcus cut him off. "Serious, Hrud migration fleets create temporal vortexes. Faster-than-light travel becomes impossible within their influence. Your ships will be trapped in normal space while entropy devours them." The Tau delegate's shoulders sagged. "Then we are all dead. The entire system. Billions of lives." "No." "No," Marcus said simply. The word carried such absolute certainty that every alien in the chamber turned to stare at him. "Not while the Emperor's angels of death draw breath." Commodore Thane bared his fangs in what might have been a laugh or a snarl. 3 warriors against a fleet? This is madness, not heroism. "Brother Captain," Cassius interjected quietly, "we are operating under diplomatic protocols. Our war gear remains in stasis aboard the Eternal Vigil." For the first time since the attack began, Captain Marcus smiled. The expression, filtered through his helm's death mask, was absolutely terrifying. "Indeed, Brother Sergeant, most unfortunate." He reached up and disengaged his helm's maglocks with a sharp hiss of equalizing pressure. The helm came free,
revealing a scarred face that looked like it had been carved from granite by a sculptor who only understood warfare. When he spoke again, his voice carried the full weight of serious, 2 centuries of combat experience. "Ambassador Kethvar, I formally request permission to defend this station and all diplomatic personnel present." The avian diplomat's head crest fluttered with confusion. You came unarmed. You said so yourself during the negotiations." Marcus nodded gravely. "We came without weapons, yes. We did not come defenseless." Brother Matthias stepped forward and began the ritual removal of his own helmet. Beneath was a face that had seen the horrors of 1,000 battlefields and found them wanting. The Emperor's angels need no weapons save our faith, our fury, and our flesh. Cassius followed suit, revealing features twisted by combat stims and ritual scarification. "We are weapons, forged in the fires of Terra's gene forges and tempered in the crucible of eternal war." The alien delegates watched in fascination and fearful horror as the 3 Space Marines began stripping away the non-combat elements of their power armor. Diplomatic robes fell away to reveal the massive ceramite plates beneath. Ceremonial chains and honors were set aside with reverent care. "This is suicide," Mien protested. "Even if you could somehow board their vessels, you have no way to—" "The Hrud fear only one thing in this galaxy,"
Marcus interrupted, his hands working to unlock his armor's combat restraints. They have learned, through 10 millennia of bitter experience, that there exists a species so utterly relentless, so completely without fear, that even entropy itself cannot stop them.
Another explosion rocked the station. Emergency bulkheads began sealing as atmosphere vented into space. The combined alien fleets were dying, their elegant formations dissolving into debris fields of corroded metal. Alife Ariel's psychic senses suddenly screamed warnings. They come! The vanguard organisms breach the outer hull. By Isha's tears, they move through sealed corridors as if the barriers were not there. The main blast doors to the diplomatic chamber began to buckle. Something was pressing against them from the other side. Something that aged the reinforced adamantium to brittle rust in seconds. Captain Marcus finished his preparations and stood to his full height. Without the diplomatic modifications to his armor, he looked like what he truly was, a walking engine of destruction, built by humanity's finest artificers and blessed by 10,000 years of righteous fury.
"Brothers," he said, quietly, "it has been an honor." "An honor, Captain," they replied in unison. The blast doors crumbled away, revealing shapes that hurt to look at directly. The HFY flowed into the chamber like liquid shadow made manifest, their forms shifting between dimensions as entropy fields made reality itself unstable around them. The aliens screamed, some tried to run. Others simply collapsed as the psychic weight of approaching temporal dissolution crushed their minds. The Space Marines charged! What followed lasted either 3 seconds or 3 hours. Time itself had become meaningless in the presence of the HFY. But in that impossible moment between heartbeats, the assembled alien diplomats witnessed something that would haunt their dreams forever. 3 human warriors moving with such perfect coordination,
Such absolute fury that they seemed to bend causality itself to their will. Brother Matthias took point, his massive form slamming into the leading HUD with enough force to crater the deck plating. His gauntleted hands closed around the creature's temporal distortion field and impossibly held on despite entropy trying to age his ceramite armor to dust. Cassius flanked left, using the chamber's curved walls to gain momentum before launching himself at the second wave of invaders. His battle cry, a litany of hate learned in the deepest vaults of the Reclusium, caused the HUD to recoil as if his words themselves were weapons. Captain Marcus advanced straight into the heart of the alien formation, each step leaving bootprints in deck plates that aged 1,000 years with each impact. He moved like inevitability given form. His very presence forcing the HFY to acknowledge that some things could not be entropy killed. And through it all, the surviving aliens could only watch in stunned silence as 3 unarmed humans fought creatures of living time itself and began to win. The battle was not over. The station continued dying around them, and the HFY fleet still darkened the void beyond. But in that moment, the assembled representatives of a dozen species learned a terrible truth. When humanity went to war, they did not bring weapons. They became them. The war room fell silent as the emergency sirens finally ceased. Commander Kveth of the Felinian Defense Fleet stood over the tactical display, his golden eyes reflecting the red warnings that painted every screen. 3 hours. That's all they had before the Sithrak Hive Fleet would breach their final defensive line. "Sir,
Lieutenant Vexara's voice cracked slightly. Her feline ears flattened against her skull. "The outer colonies have gone dark. Billions consumed. The hive mind's bioships are adapting to our plasma weaponry faster than we can modify it." Kaveth's claws extended involuntarily, scraping against the metal console. In 2 centuries of military service, he had never faced anything like the Synthrak. These weren't raiders seeking resources or territory. They were devourers, transforming entire worlds into writhing organic factories that birthed ever more monstrous offspring. The tactical display showed their situation in brutal clarity. 7 billion Felinian civilians trapped on the core worlds. The defense fleet reduced to barely 300 ships. Against them, a living tsunami of biovessels that stretched across 3 star systems, each one hungry for flesh to feed the endless swarm. "Commander," came a hesitant voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from the humans." Kaveth's ears perked up despite himself. The Terran Imperium, those strange bipedal mammals who had appeared in the galactic community less than 50 years ago, their reputation was complicated. Fanatically religious, brutally efficient in warfare, and possessed of technology that seemed to function through belief as much as science. "Put them through." The holographic display flickered, revealing a figure that made several Felinian officers step back in surprise. The human was massive, easily 2 meters tall and proportionally broad, encased in ceramite armor that bore the aquila symbol of their Imperium. But what struck Kveth most were the eyes, pale blue, confident, utterly without fear. Regarding the assembled Felinians with what could only be described as confident, protective determination. "I am Captain Aurelius of the Ultramarines 3rd Company," the human spoke, his voice carrying an accent that sounded almost archaic. "Sirius, we received your distress beacon 17 hours ago." "Captain," Kaveth began carefully, "we appreciate any assistance, but surely you understand the scope of what we face. The Sithrak Hive Fleet numbers in the millions of bioships. They've consumed 14 star systems. Our combined fleets couldn't—" "We know what they are," Aurelius interrupted, and something in his tone made Kaveth's tail twitch nervously. "Sirius, we have faced their kind before. The Great Devourer, we call them. Terranids." Lieutenant Vexara leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, how many ships do you bring?" "Our scans show only a single strike cruiser?" The human's expression didn't change. "The battle barge Invincible Reason carries my entire company, 100 battle brothers." The war room erupted in desperate, dismayed chittering. Kaveth raised a paw for silence, trying to maintain absurdity. "Captain, surely you misunderstand. We face millions of bioships. 100 warriors, however skilled, will be sufficient." The simple certainty in those 3 words silenced the room. Kaveth studied the human's face, searching for any sign of bravado or delusion. He found neither, only an unshakable conviction that seemed to radiate from the warrior like heat from a forge. "Very well," Kaveth said finally. "What do you require from us?" "Orbital bombardment coordinates for the primary hive nodes. Evacuation routes for your civilian population. And prayer to the God Emperor that we arrive in time." The transmission ended, leaving the Felinians staring at empty air. Kaveth's second-in-command, Colonel Thrix, was the first to speak. "Sir, surely they can't be serious. 1 ship against a hive fleet?
Before Kaveth could respond, the proximity alarms began screaming. Lieutenant Vexara's claws danced over her console, her expression shifting from confusion to awe to something approaching fear. Sir, they just translated into the outer system. But the readings, they're not dropping out of warp. They're coming in hot, sir. Combat speed, directly through the High Fleet's advance elements. The main display shifted to show the tactical situation. The Sithrak bioships, massive organisms bristling with weapon symbiotes,
had formed a feeding formation around the fourth planet, their smaller vessels swarming like antibodies through the system. And through the center of this living constellation, a single Imperial vessel burned at maximum thrust. Are they insane? Colonel Thrix whispered. They watched in surprised fascination and horror as the battle barge Invincible Reason smashed through the outer hive ships like a spear through flesh. Biovessels the size of cities turned to engage, spitting streams of corrosive organisms and bioelectric discharges. The Imperial ship's void shields flared and sparked, but held. Its weapons batteries spoke in tongues of fire, macro cannon shells and lance strikes carving through chitin and bone as if they were paper. Impossible, Lieutenant Vexara breathed. They're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They should be dissolved to atoms by now. But they weren't. The human ship continued its relentless advance, leaving a wake of dying bioships behind it. And then Kaveth heard something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. A sound transmitted across all Vox frequencies, audible even over the screaming of dying hive creatures. Singing. 100 human voices raised in a hymn of war, their words incomprehensible, but their intent crystal clear. These warriors were not afraid. They were not even concerned. They were happy, singing praises to their God-Emperor as they carved through living nightmares like farmers reaping wheat. Ave Imperator! Gloria in excelsis terra! The battle barge reached the planet's upper atmosphere and began deploying drop pods. Kaveth counted them. Exactly 100 armored capsules falling like meteors toward the hive world's surface. Each one carrying a single superhuman warrior into the fearful heart of hell itself. Sir, Vexara's voice was barely above a whisper. The bioships are regrouping. They're converging on the human landing sites. The hive mind recognizes the threat. Kaveth watched the tactical display with mounting dread. The drop pods had landed in the center of the largest hive cluster, surrounded by millions upon millions of Synthrak organisms. The bioships in orbit were burning through the atmosphere, racing to reinforce their ground forces. Whatever the humans planned, they had perhaps minutes before they were overwhelmed completely. Then the surface erupted in light. "What are they firing?" Colonel Thrix demanded, studying the energy readings. "Those aren't plasma weapons or las cannons. The heat signature is... It's impossible. Nothing burns that hot." Kaveth knew what they were seeing, though he could, surprised, barely believe it. The humans carried weapons that fired miniature suns, bolt rounds that exploded with the fury of stellar cores. And they wielded them with the casual precision of artists at work. The first tactical reports began filtering in from the automated surveillance drones. What they revealed defied every military doctrine Kaveth had ever studied. The humans had not taken defensive positions. They had not established kill zones or fallback points. Instead, They had formed a spearhead and begun advancing directly into the heart of the hive. "Sir, you need to see this," Lieutenant Vexara said, her voice hollow with shock. She activated the visual feeds from the surface drones. The display showed a hellscape beyond imagination. The hive world's surface writhed with living architecture, biotowers that pulsed like hearts, spawning pools that birthed warrior forms by the thousands, digestion pits where the processed remains of consumed worlds were converted into new horrors. And through this nightmare strode 100 figures in midnight blue armor, their weapons speaking death with every shot. Kveth watched a single human warrior, Aurelius, he realized, recognizing the ornate armor, step into a spawning pit containing hundreds of newly formed Sithrak warriors. The creatures surged toward him, claws and bioweapons raised. The human began to sing louder. What followed was less a battle than a massacre. The human moved with impossible speed and precision, his chainsword carving through chitin and bone, while his bolt pistol painted the cavern walls with alien ichor. Every movement was economical, purposeful, perfect. In 30 seconds, the spawning pit was silent, except for the human's continued hymn. "How?" Colonel Thrix whispered. "They're not even taking casualties. This is impossible." But it was happening. Across the hive complex, 100 human warriors were dismantling an alien civilization piece by piece. They moved like confident weapons, each one worth a battalion of normal soldiers, and they were winning. The breakthrough came when Captain Aurelius reached the primary hive node, a massive biostructure that pulsed with psychic energy, coordinating the entire swarm. The Sithrak had concentrated their strongest defenders here, warrior forms the size of tanks and biocannons that could level city blocks. Against any normal assault force, it would have been impregnable. Aurelius walked through their defensive fire without slowing. When a biocannon the size of a building focused on him, he simply raised his storm shield and continued advancing. The corrosive streams that could dissolve starship hulls splashed harmlessly against blessed adamantium. When the massive warrior forms charged him, he met them with his power sword, the disruption field parting their enhanced carapaces like silk. And then he reached the hive node itself. Kveth watched in surprised, stunned silence as the human captain raised his weapon toward the towering biostructure. But instead of firing, he began to speak. Even through the vox distortion, his words carried confident authority. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, I consign you to oblivion. Your hunger ends here." The power sword ignited with brilliant energy and drove deep into the hive node's core. The effect was surprised and catastrophic. Across the planet's surface, Sithrak organisms began convulsing. Their connection to the hive mind severed. The bioships in orbit started drifting, their living pilots dying as the psychic network that sustained them collapsed. But Kveth realized the surprised scope of what the humans had accomplished when Lieutenant Vexara's sensors picked up something surprised. "Sir, the other hive fleets, the ones attacking the outer colonies, they're withdrawing." The tactical display updated, showing Sithrak forces across 7 star systems, breaking off their attacks and fleeing into deep space. The destruction of this single hive node had somehow crippled the entire invasion force. It was the primary nexus, Captain Aurelius explained when they re-established communication. His armor was scored and blackened, but his voice remained steady. The Great Devourer operates through a hierarchical consciousness. Destroy the prime node, and the lesser swarms become directionless. Kveth stared at the human's image, trying to process what he'd witnessed. "Captain, your knowledge of these creatures, how did you know?" "We have fought them for 10,000 years," Aurelius replied simply. "They are merely the latest threat to humanity's destiny among the stars. They will return, eventually. They always do. But not here, not now." 100 warriors, Colonel Thrix muttered, still staring at the tactical displays. 100 warriors just saved 7 billion lives. "We are Adeptus Astartes," Aurelius said, and for the first time his expression softened slightly. "Proud, we know no fear because the Emperor protects. We know no defeat because we serve humanity's future. And we know no limits because faith and duty make all things possible."
The aftermath took days to process. The Synthrak Hive fleet, leaderless and confused, was systematically hunted down by the combined Felinian and human forces. The bioships that had seemed so terrible proved surprisingly fragile once their coordination was broken. Within a week, the threat that had consumed 14 star systems was eliminated entirely. Kveth found himself aboard the Invincible Reason for the victory celebration. The battle barge's halls were vast and solemn, filled with shrines to the human god-emperor and monuments to battles fought across the galaxy. The Space Marines moved through these spaces with quiet reverence, their massive forms surprisingly graceful. "Your species fascinates me," he admitted to Captain Aurelius as they stood before a viewing port showing the liberated worlds below. "We have studied your tactics, your technology, your history, but I still don't understand how you do it." "What, Commander?" "Do what, Commander?" "Win impossible battles, face overwhelming odds with songs instead of fear, make the universe itself bend to your will through sheer determination." Aurelius considered this for a long moment. "You come from a peaceful world, do you not? Your people evolved as hunters, but you hunt prey that runs away when threatened. You understand survival through avoidance, adaptation, compromise." Kveth's ears flicked in acknowledgement. "That is the way of civilized beings. Perhaps, but humanity comes from Terra, and Terra teaches different lessons, such as that the universe is hostile beyond imagination, that survival requires not adaptation, but dominance, that when faced with impossible odds, the correct response is not retreat, but charge." Aurelius gestured toward the shrine-lined halls around them. "Every one of these monuments represents a battle humanity should have lost. Every prayer we sing celebrates a victory that logic said was impossible. And that actually works?" For the first time since they had met, Captain Aurelius smiled. It was not a gentle expression. "Commander, we are a species that conquered our own death world, then looked at the galaxy and decided it needed conquest too. We turned our bloodiest conflicts into holy crusades, our most dangerous enemies into training exercises. When other species encounter something they cannot defeat, they flee or adapt. When humans encounter something we cannot defeat, we get angry and try harder.
Kveth thought about the battle he had witnessed, the impossible advance through overwhelming odds, the casual destruction of nightmares that had consumed star systems. And your emperor? This god you serve?
Mysterious. Protects, Aurelius finished. The emperor protects because we believe he protects. We win impossible battles because we refuse to accept that they are impossible. Faith becomes reality. Determination becomes destiny. It is humanity's greatest strength, and perhaps our greatest madness. As the Invincible Reason prepared to depart for its next campaign, Kveth stood in the docking bay watching the Space Marines conduct their final preparations. Each warrior moved with the same quiet confidence he had observed in their captain. Not arrogance, but simple certainty that whatever they faced next, they would prevail. Lieutenant Vexara joined him at the viewing window. "Sir, Fleet Command is asking about a formal alliance with the Imperium." Kveth considered this carefully. The humans were undeniably effective allies.
They were also utterly terrifying in their absolute conviction and casual brutality. The galaxy they envisioned, where humanity's destiny superseded all other considerations, was not one most species would willingly embrace. But neither was a galaxy devoured by the Sithrak. Draft the preliminary agreements, he decided, but include provisions for maintaining our autonomy. Humanity may be our salvation, but I suspect they would be equally dangerous as masters. As the battle barge activated its warp engines and vanished into the Eumaterium, Kveth reflected on the lesson he had learned. The universe was indeed hostile beyond imagination, filled with horrors that could consume entire civilizations. But it was also inhabited by humans, and humans, he had discovered, were the most terrifying thing in it. Not because they were the strongest or most advanced, but because they simply refused to lose. In a galaxy where every rational species eventually found something too dangerous to fight, humanity had apparently decided that nothing fell into that category. "The Emperor protects," Captain Aurelius had said. And after witnessing their impossible victory, Kveth was beginning to suspect that might actually be true. Not because of any divine intervention, but because when an entire species believes something strongly enough, reality itself eventually stops arguing. The Sithrict would return someday, as they always did. But when they did, they would find humanity waiting for them, singing hymns of war and refusing to acknowledge that the battle was hopeless. Kveth almost pitied them.